We're just about to take another virtual tour, all safe and social distancing, and via our app with the good company of Eamonn McEneaney from Waterford Treasures. Good morning, Eamonn.
Hello, Eamonn.
Good morning, Ollie. Good morning, Mary.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good stuff. Today you're going to talk about silver belonging to the Catholic Church in the 18th century and it ending up in the cathedral.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct. Waterford is very lucky, and again the museum is lucky to have it on loan from the Bishop of Waterford and Lismore. The silver we have is the biggest collection in Ireland of 18th century silver belonging to Roman Catholic Church in Ireland. So it's very, very important, and the pieces themselves are quite spectacular. And I suppose just to go back a bit, why is this so unusual? Well, it's unusual because, of course, after the defeat of King James, the Catholic King of England, at the Battle of the Boyne by William of Orange, the Protestant king, and you now had a Protestant kingdom in England and a Protestant kingdom in Ireland, Protestant-dominated kingdom in England and Ireland. All the churches, of course, went into the hands of the Church of Ireland, or the Protestant Church here in Ireland. So the Catholics lost all their churches again. Also, a lot of rich Catholics emigrated, as did poor Catholics, and some of the poor Catholics who emigrated, of course, did well, and most of them went to Spain. And one of the reasons they went to Spain is A, because Spain was a Catholic country, and B, because Waterford had huge connections over the centuries with Spain, the wine trade. So families like the Walshes, the Whites and the Crews, they went off to Spain, but they kept their links with Waterford through trade, and of course they decided they'd endow the church here. And I suppose one little bit of good news on it was that Waterford was lucky in that it had what's called a big chapel, and the big chapel was in exactly the same size as the present cathedral, Roman Catholic cathedral, is today.
Okay.
That was built at the end of the 18th century, but the big chapel was built at the end of the 17th century, which was unusual at the time. I suppose, not to be emphasising differences, but rather Bishop Foy, the Church of Ireland bishop at the time in the 1690s, didn't object when the Catholics of Waterford applied to the Protestant Council to build the big chapel. And they had to build it, of course, behind a row of houses, just like the Presbyterians and other groups, Quakers, had to do the same. Bishop Mills later, who succeeded Bishop Foy was a fairly tolerant man. Mills was equally tolerant. He employed Catholics and was much berated by Dean Swift in Dublin for doing so, and even by some members of the Protestant Council at the time. But he was a fairly liberal man for his time. But anyway, they had a chapel, and the very fact that they had a chapel then allowed people like the Walshes and the Crews and the Whites at different times in the 18th century to give silver. I suppose that the really big collection is 6 candlesticks. They're over 2 foot high, and a beautiful silver cross. And they're very Spanish. Of course, the Spanish their ceremonies were really elaborate, which was in a big contrast, of course, to Protestant ceremonies, which is very pared back and very minimalist. And of course, in Spain, they had processions out on the street and all the rest of it. Of course, that couldn't happen in Ireland at the time. The Crews sent over this beautiful silver in the 1750s, the candlesticks and the crucifix. We've had them ever since. And it's interesting, Crews also realised the poor people of Waterford needed help, and they set up a charity called the Crew Langtons. They're married into the Langtons of Kilkenny, and they set up a charity in St. Patrick's for widows. So that was a very generous thing for them to do, and that they didn't forget their home city.
Also, just on that, Eamonn, I was interested to hear you talk about, the huge wine trade and a lot of people going over to Spain for that. Our own Aoibhinn Fallon here in WLR actually made a documentary that was aired and is still available to listen online, called The Walshes of Wine Islands, and it's all about Bernard Walsh, who ended up in Tenerife and the wine empire over there. And of course, that Tenerife is an island of Spain, I'm right in saying, aren't I?
Yes, that's correct.
So it's just, it all kind of ties in the fact that so many people emigrated to different parts of Spain like that.
Yeah, and he's really famous, and because he's got the biggest archive of any Atlantic merchant in the world. That family kept everything. The amount of history that's there is unbelievable. And the other great family then were the Whites, and he gave a beautiful monstrance throne, which is about nearly 4 foot high. It's massive, big silver piece, the biggest piece of silver we'll have in the new Silver Museum. And again, that was given again as a gift to the cathedral with the monstrance. Sadly, the monstrance has been missing for over a century. And then, of course, at benediction, those people who are familiar with benediction, or the monstrance would have the host in it, and then it would be placed in the throne for 40 hours after that. And then, of course, they'd have incense burning, and they'd have a turable for keeping the incense in, and an incense boat. They gifted these to the city in the 1770s.
And all this is available to see, obviously, when the museums reopen.
When the new silver, they are going to be in the new Silver Museum, which will open as soon as we get this business over us, and it'll be open hopefully in the autumn time.
Well, we'll put some pictures online in the meantime. And Eamonn, thanks as always. always to you.
Thank you.
You're very
Thank
kind,
you.
Eamon.
Thanks,
And listen,
Mary.
we better leave you back to polishing all that silver.
Yeah,
True.
that's another job.
Get it ready for the Silver Museum.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eamon.
Bye-bye.